record this as well because we are, thank you ladies so much for being here today. This is our second DLH writers panel for the year. And what we're doing with the Donate Leave Hollywood writers panels is talking about organ donation, but not really talking about organ donation yet, right? So the thing I found about organ donation, if you have a panel about organ donation, nobody's that interested because only people who have been through organ donation. And what we're trying to do with these writers panels is really to get folks to think about organ donation beyond people who have never thought about it, and to have and empower people who are telling stories to incorporate organ donation into their stories. And it's funny because Jennifer, for you, you even have an organ donation connection on one of your podcasts and you don't even know it, I bet, because it was just a mention and it was so subtle and it was so fast. And I was like, oh my God, all roads lead back, to organ donation. And so even when we don't think that there's anything in our lives that are touching organ donation, it's sort of there. So Donate Leave Hollywood's goal is to build relationships with the entertainment industry and help to tell more authentic stories about organ donation, because what we tend to see are these very these kind of ooey gooey pieces, right? Like we tend to get stuck in this genre of horror or sci-fi or just medical dramas. Obviously New Amsterdam has done probably the best on organ donation of any medical show, really. And so we want to help people kind of explore the topic of organ donation, but do that not necessarily like head on. So I really, Motherhood May feels like it's for mothers and Mother's Day. And for me, one of the most powerful stories ever told is the donor mom story. And so Tara's gonna share that, piece of her story and what it is to be a donor mother and bring in that organ donation element. So I'm Tanaya Wallace. I'm the founder of Donate Leave Hollywood, and I run Donate Leave Hollywood as a project of the One Legacy Foundation. And then we have national partners all across the country who participate with DLH, organ procurement organizations, patient organizations, transplant centers, because really when it comes to the entertainment industry, Hollywood is national. Everyone might have their little service areas where they're educating and getting people to register as donors. But when there's a storyline on television that has to do with organ donation, it either, scares the bejesus out of everyone who's watching, or can really touch, move, and inspire and encourage people to even register as organ donors. And that's what we've seen as the power of television. So today I am so excited to be joined by Erica Green, Jennifer Tracy, and Tara Storch. These are all women who are storytellers, really, in their different ways. And so kind of dip into each of your genres. And then I have some common questions for all of you about how motherhood is really portrayed on television. So Erica, I want to start with you because I can't really get the episode Catch out of my mind. The reason why we got connected is Shireen, who is her mother was a liver recipient, and she wrote a powerful episode on New Amsterdam, got a Donate Leave Hollywood Inspire Award for it. And so when I was like, well, hey, I want to, tell stories of motherhood, she was like, oh yeah, Erica just wrote this amazing story about motherhood. So, just that opening scene. So this is the episode Catch on New Amsterdam. It aired on April 20th. So if you guys have not seen it, just go onto like the NBC website and you can watch it. And the opening scene has I think it's just music and then the visuals of it. And it is a woman in labor. So you see her obviously like through labor, and then you see the joy after and the relief and the look between the husband and wife and the baby. And then immediately you know something is actually wrong with the mom and there's some sort of medical issue. So I want you to talk about that scene because there was so much in there of like the struggle and then the joy and then fear all encapsulated in one.
Sure. That was my love letter to moms, Catch. And that opening sequence, I wanted to express throughout the episode that there is more than one way to give birth on television. A lot of times you see a mom in a bed and she's sort of, whatever. So we got a birthing bar in there. She's squatting. Hello Sunshine is the music by Wilson Pickett. And it's, those joyous moments can be eclipsed, unfortunately, sometimes. And in this case, she noticed right away because she was suddenly unable to hold her child. So imagine doing all of the work of bringing a child into the world, and then suddenly it's like, there is a problem. There's a medical problem. Everyone is seeing that it is an issue. And, just the ecstasy and the agony of being a mom all encapsulated within the first, hours that you have become a mother. I wanted to sort of capture in that first moment.
Well, and then she goes on to have, because obviously anyone who's had a medical condition, you have that first inkling that something's wrong, and then you have a battery of tests. So there's a lot of unknown, and you kind of get all of that. And then you even see the way that it's shown, you don't hear the doctors, you don't hear the diagnosis, you just see her reaction to the whole thing.
Right.
And so that something's gone wrong. And so you really, it's just like this crazy roller coaster.
It's very sad. But it gets better. But yeah, it's TV. We got to start out with like an issue, a challenge that we need to figure out how to surmount. And first for the episode is she's going to have to separate from that thing that she has spent the last 9 months growing and building a relationship with, in order to save her life, as well as to maintain the healthiness of her own family. She has to separate from them immediately after giving birth. And, she wants one last thing that she can do with this child in terms of bonding, which is try and get her to latch.
And that doesn't work.
And the baby does not latch. And so the entire episode is her just trying to develop some sort of connection before she just becomes a lady on a screen to this child for the next 5 to 6 months.
And that, as a mom, like that, when they said you'd have to separate from your child for 4 to 5 months, not weeks, months, I was like, a lot happens in those 4 to 5 months. Like I couldn't even imagine. And I was so happy to see that scene about the baby not latching, because I think that the difficulty around breastfeeding is not, breastfeeding has been kind of normalized, which is awesome. Like, yay, we breastfeed. But what isn't really normalized is the challenges that you go through in order to be able to breastfeed and the feelings of inadequacy. And you showed all of that.
Yeah. I was trying to do as much as we can in 42 minutes. So yeah, there are multiple storylines, but this one, I have never, I never gave birth by choice. And, but I do know, and I have seen people with problems with latching. That first attempt is like, docking at like a NASA station in space. So I wanted to get that in there. They're like, 4 other pairs of hands in there trying to get the baby to, like there's all these things that, you never really talk about and are decidedly experienced by people with the capacity for pregnancy all the time. And they never get to sort of get those moments. And so that was sort of the important message, is that you're being seen and you're being heard. And I think that's the most important thing a storyteller can do, is build community with somebody on the other side of the screen. So I was trying to do that.
Well, and what I really did love this episode. What I also loved was that the three moms, like the three main storylines, are all Black women. And I thought that was it was so important. And it was almost like jarring, honestly, like not jarring in a bad way, but like, whoa, you're not just going to have one Black woman as this token representative of all African-American women and all, every kind of like throw everything into one woman as representative of all Black women, around the world. And you actually saw three very distinct women going through three very distinct conflicts and challenges, and and coming through in a different way. And was it refreshing to be able to have a show go, yeah, let's have three Black women?
It was because I'm trying to anytime I do any kind of writing, is to normalize the fact that we all are human. And so when we talk about connection, everyone's story can then be put in the center of the narrative, and stand in for everyone else. And so that was important to me, that these are women of different economic strata, obviously different educational backgrounds, different issues that they are all experiencing. Yes, one of the storylines was very specific to the African-American woman experience, but all of the moms, including the mom who was a white woman, were all experiencing things that have happened to, many mothers. And so just because the three main ladies happen to be African-American women, that doesn't necessarily mean that the story stops at the door of African-American women.
Yeah, totally.
And I have gotten feedback from women who, they're like, oof, child, let me tell you how long it took me to get my baby to latch, or my decision to give my child up for adoption because I knew that I was not in any way, shape, or form interested in being a mother. The stories of a woman was like, they did find that I had a problem in my abdomen that had been obscured by my pregnancy. And, so it's interesting that people are like, oh my God, I've never seen that story. And they were all delivered with people with, brown skin, and it still resonated. So
right.
I'm glad that I had that opportunity.
They were universal stories, and Black women can tell universal stories, not just Black women's stories.
Because we all live within the same universe. Like we're all, so if you live within the universe, then whenever you step to the fore, you are telling a universal story, is the way I think about it.
Now, you mentioned that one of the stories was very specific, like, because you integrated a ton of statistics. You actually integrated, you were teaching the audience something. Like, I didn't know about a VBAC calculator. I did not know if they had just changed the calculation to Caucasian, that she wouldn't be in danger. Like that whole thing. And then there were also, that character laid down some statistics.
Oh, because she knows things.
She knew them.
She's a lady who knew things.
Yeah, she knew things. And she wasn't going to let those things, kind of color that whole experience that she was going through. And she was an incredibly strong advocate. And I think that's the thing, anyone who's gone through anything, birth or any medical challenge, you kind of know you have to be an advocate for yourself. But I wonder too, obviously it was sort of your intention to educate the audience. And as a writer on medical shows, there's been a ton of research that shows that if writers integrate actual information into the television show, and then you do a pre and post test with viewers, that viewers know that new information now and retain that information. Like, storytelling is one of the best ways to actually get public health information into people's minds and
Put the
hearts.
pill in the peanut butter. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So was that your goal? And then also, like, how do I do that for organ donation? Because I've got some stats I'd like to share out with
Sure. Here. I tackled things like the VBAC calculator, as well as just the over medicalization of birth. So those were twin things that happened within that particular storyline. The fact that, you come into a hospital, they don't want you to labor too long. They push a couple of things on you to get that labor to go. And then unfortunately, sometimes that results in a cesarean that is unnecessary. They're just giving you the time. But if they give you the time, then that means they're not turning the beds over. And, so it becomes this whole thing. In terms of giving information like the VBAC calculator, which is having a vaginal birth after cesarean, just so people know. If you are a Black or a Latina woman, you are assessed a point that makes it less likely for you to be able to try and do that during your trial of labor. And what they're trying to do is go, well, yeah, because sometimes, they have hypertension, they have these underlying conditions that we don't know about, but really what they're trying to account for is racism, is essentially what they're trying to account for. And they just kind of do that. And then what that means is more African-American and Latino women are forced to have cesareans that may not necessarily be necessary because they just want to, what they're not doing is they're just looking at the woman in their totality and making a decision. They are also assessing a thing based on stuff that, they don't know whether it may or may not affect the woman. And so what we're saying is, please just look at the woman.
Yeah.
And so in terms of storytelling, especially let's say with donation stories, is coming at it from a completely different way. Like this one was very informative, and there was like, facts and figures and, because I wanted to get things out there. I was like, this ain't never been said about Black women, and this ain't never been said on TV. So we got to say this too. In terms of stories, when you humanize the story, so that's the first part of the peanut butter or the hamburger meat, is to really get you in a different way. And so that's a great way that I have noticed with storytelling, is if you are really on board with a specific person, and then you go, oh, and by the way, this other thing is happening, then you're like, oh, well, I'm already invested. I love this person. Let me see what the story is going to be that unfolds. That seems like to be like one of the stronger ways, is if you empathize and you understand a person or a situation, and then you go, oh, there's also this other thing that is in there and how it affects other people. It doesn't necessarily always have to have like a rosy ending, but on broadcast television, things have to have a rosy ending to some extent, or at least leave you with a or a good question in your mind. That helps as well. And as a child of a father who willingly gave his good kidney to one of his nephews, who's not even a blood relative. My father is a universal donor. And he was like, you know what? My kids are out of college. I'm healthy. I've run enough marathons. And he gave lovingly to my cousin, whose kids were still in grade school. And he was like, you got so much more life that you got to get through. So you can, have relationship stuff that you can show, and then someone offering, as opposed to needing.
Right.
Sometimes that might be a good way to show it. And like, what is the calculus, and what makes a person make that sort of decision, without obviously putting them on a pedestal and making them magical or anything like that. But, people who have empathy and understand that they will still be able to live a very full and awesome life. My dad is still kicking it and being awesome and playing golf and being retired and doing all these other things. And my cousin is still alive. And now, his kids have graduated from college and gone on to have children, and, one is now a doctor. So there are ways that you can tell those stories empathetically, if you start with the human first.
I'm telling you, all roads lead back to organ donation. So people think it's just like some niche thing, but it's like it all comes back. One of the things that I don't know who said it, but there was a line. I wrote it down when I heard it, and it made me think of Tara immediately. So this is gonna, we're gonna go into Tara's story now, because and this catch storyline really propelled me into it. They said, there's always going to be something you can't control, but what you can control is what you do next, which is, that was for a lot of the characters on this catch storyline. I think it's good advice for all of us, you know. And Tara, it made me think immediately of you, and was so glad that we're having this conversation. You, when you sent me your bio, I thought it was really interesting because, it says you're first and foremost a wife and mother, and a mother of 3 children. And it is your daughter Taylor who brought you into this world of organ donation, which, you'd probably prefer not to be part of, but now that you are, you've become not only a part of it, but really a leader in it, by continuing to share Taylor's story and your family, and doing that so openly. Tell us about your kids. Tell us about Taylor. Tell us about your entrance into this space of organ donation.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's not a space I ever thought I'd be in, ever. And Erica, you're right. I think I'll share my story, but I want to go back to what Erica said, something about, there's just not a lot of storylines out there about the donor side, right? There are stories out there a lot about the recipients and the life they receive back, right? But that side would never happen until a donor family said yes. So it all starts with that yes from a donor family, right? So I'd love to see more stories about that side of it. I think it's so important. But my story is that, I am a mom of 3. I will always be a mom of 3. And they are the joys of my life. And I have Taylor and Ryan, who graduate from Texas A&M next week.
Oh, gig 'em.
And yeah, gig 'em, yeah. And then our daughter Peyton is at Texas Tech, and she just got accepted into their nursing program. So we are very proud of them. But we were on our spring break vacation in 2010 and having the time of our life. And it was our very first day and the last run of the day. And Taylor and my husband and my son were skiing down, and my little daughter Peyton and I were down waiting for them and getting hot chocolate. And Taylor did a skid and had a freak accident and went into the trees and hit a tree. Doing everything right, wearing a helmet, good skier, and my husband and my son saw it all. And we were in the hospital knowing we were faced with something very dire. And a nurse approached us and said, she's a beautiful candidate for organ donation, and would you consider it? And we had never talked about organ donation, not once in our family. I mean, I think I checked it off on my license, but it wasn't a conversation we had in our home. And we said yes, which sparked this whole ripple effect of good. And Taylor saved and improved the lives of 5 people. And, we said yes, truly, because it was the type of child Taylor was. She was always thinking of others. She was just that kid. And so we knew if she would have been asked that question, she absolutely would have said yes. So she saved and improved 5 people's lives with a gift of her heart and both kidneys and her pancreas, her liver, and her cornea. And I remember standing by the hospital bed and looking at my husband and saying, I have got to hear her heartbeat again. And I didn't know how that was going to happen. I didn't even know the process of really organ donation. But I did know we'd have to connect with that person, and we were able to do that. And that story hit Good Morning America, which kind of launched this whole national momentum. And, we had started a foundation in her name to really share the importance of organ donation. And we also realized how hard of a topic this is to talk about. because it's hard to sit around the dinner table and ask your friends if, hey, you want to be an organ donor, right? Because immediately people think of death. But organ donation is all about life. That's what it's about. It's 100% about life. And so we knew we needed to kind of figure out how to make this more of a good conversation. So we coined this phrase, outlive yourself. And outlive yourself is how we share the importance of organ donation and how to talk about it. And we've had some great national partners come alongside us. For example, OPI nail polish created a Taylor blue color that went around and shared the outlive yourself message. And recently Nike created outlive yourself socks for us. And so you'll see on these socks, the blue represents the color of Taylor's eyes. They were so blue. That's why this color is just so important to me. And there's 5 stripes on the socks, and which represent the 5 lives she saved. Mm-hmm. And so we have, had incredible national partners who have helped share this message and make it a national message. But it's something I never thought I'd ever be part of, but it has created such a ripple effect of good. It has become truly my why, right? It's become why I do this, is not only to keep Taylor's spirit alive, which is my utmost why, but also the powerful knowledge people get about the gift of organ donation, which is an uncomfortable topic, right? And so how do we make that better? And that's through outlive yourself, and me just speaking and being able to be part of things that bring attention to the importance of organ donation just, keeps that going, that momentum going, and also keeps Taylor's spirit alive, which is very important to me.
I think it's really, I did one thing for Mother's Day, this piece for donor moms to write into their local newspapers a story about being a mother for all days. And that, the idea of when your child has passed, that you are still, the tie of mothership doesn't end.
Yeah, it's hard though, because I mean, I remember the first time someone asked me how many children I have after Taylor passed. I mean, that's a normal question when you're out small talking to meet people. Oh, how do you do? How many kids you have? And it just stopped me in my tracks. I'd never been asked that, and being able to explain that, right? And then you learn kind of some.
So what do you say? Because that was my question, is like, as a mom, knowing that motherhood tie doesn't end, like when somebody says, how many kids do you have? How do you answer that now?
I always say 3. And then I say, I have a son graduating from A&M. I have a daughter who's in nursing school, about to start nursing school. So tell me about your kids. Because if I also have to kind of protect my heart, and not everybody needs to know every little detail about, my story, right? And who, wait a minute, you just said 3, and if someone comes back to that and says that,
right.
Obviously I'll share the story, but I don't immediately go there but I'm always going to acknowledge I'm a mom of 3. And I have to be honest that Mother's Day is hard. This isn't a day that it's a reminder that my nest is not full anymore. I mean, I'm getting teary-eyed talking about it, but it's not easy. Mother's Day is something I used to really, really look forward to, and I still do. It's just in a different way, because I don't have all my kids here with me. But, my other 2 have become such incredible adults. And I think that it's because we just really loved them where they were. I mean, at the very beginning, we really tried to fix them, because that's what you do. You try to make it normal, right? And we finally had someone sit down with us and say, you just got to love them where they are and don't try to fix. And I'm so glad of that advice, because I realized that people were doing that to me too. People were trying to fix me, because the Tara I was before March 15th, 2010 was a completely different person now. And they kind of wanted the old Tara back, right? And she's gone. But my other 2 have become such incredible adults. And I think that this experience has shaped them into being more empathetic, more compassionate for others, more, able to sit with people in a vulnerable space because they've been through something hard, and they realize they can do hard things. they can do it, and they can survive it, and they can make it. And so they use their story. They can sit with others who are in pain, which a lot of people can't. So that's been a gift that's been given to them.
Do you think
Um,
that's the gift too? Because you have not only you've become a national organ donation advocate, you have created a foundation, you wrote a book, you do inspirational speaking and public speaking, not just in the organ donation world, but are to organizations and companies that have nothing to do with organ donation, and you're telling this story. What is it that you think, especially from this space of motherhood, like when you hear back what after you're up on stage and people come up and they're like, you're amazing, and like what is it that they say that they really connect with? Like what is it about how you as a mom tell this story? Do you think that really just as Eric was saying, you've got to connect with that person on the other side with your story? Like, what is it that you hear back that's really connecting for people?
I think the big thing that's connecting is that I'm just real. And it's the vulnerability, it's the realness, and I'm real and raw and honest. And I think that's really what people connect with, that it's not just, oh, something she's dealt with. It's, oh my gosh, she's dealt with something hard. I bet I can too. Like it's a, you know, um, when you see somebody that's gone through something hard, you think, oh, I could never do that. But then you think, oh my gosh, you're kind of just like me. Maybe I could, right? So I hope that it gives people strength, and makes them kind of rethink how they're outliving themselves. What are they doing to make a lasting difference in the lives of others? And that's what Outlive Yourself is really all about. That's why, this story is not, when I speak, you're right, I don't speak just exclusively to organ donation and transplantation communities. It's because that Outlive Yourself message is so powerful, of how you truly can make a lasting difference in the lives of others daily in what you do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think most people just connect on the vulnerability of when I share the story.
And that vulnerability, that's such a perfect segue into Jennifer, because literally on Jennifer's website there is because and I'm obsessed with your podcast. I've been like listening to it so much, and it's great, and I want to talk to you about some of those stories. But you also do some consulting with content creators as part of what you do, and part of that, what it says on your website, and I was like, oh my God, this feels so motherhood, is that you help to unveil vulnerability through narrative. Unveiling vulnerability through narrative. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I want that tattoo, like that is, I mean, I really feel like that's what Catch did. And that's why I love that episode so much. I think that's what Tara does. And that's why, again, I'm like, she tells such an amazing story. So talk to me about unveiling vulnerability through narrative.
Okay, I just have to apologize. My dogs are barking in the background. I'm so sorry. It's one of those Zoom things. It's like,
It's what we live through now. It's all good.
oh my gosh, So yes, I mean, gosh, I feel like both Erica and Tara have unveiled vulnerability just in this talk today, and what they talk about in their work and their life's work. And I can't wait to watch that episode, Catch. That sounds great. That's what inspired me to, it's what inspires me to write anything that I write. And it's what inspired me to do the podcast. And, going back to what both Erica and Tara said about, it's about the human, it's about that person's story. And, one of the, I studied improv years ago for a long time and performed sketch comedy. And that was kind of a basis for me. I went to film school, but then I was an actor and whatever, but improv, I learned so much in improv. And I remember the teacher said, we were doing a scene and he said, no, make it a Snickers bar, not candy bar. And it's such a thing of like the specificity of that. It's like, you could say, oh, there's a story about a woman who, was killed in a tidal wave in Indonesia. But if you say there's this woman and she, is a single mom and she's there with her son on vacation and they haven't been able to have a vacation, it's like you're already like, oh, I want to know more. So it's like, it's exactly what we've been talking about, is the specificity of being real. And that's what's relatable. And so I think when we go straight to that heart of like humanity, you just get to the vulnerability that much faster, because we can all relate to that. We can all relate to our broken parts and our, that's why I started the podcast, because I was a mess when I had my child. He would not latch. I had to go to this special place called the pump station, and this and she was trying to get it was the only I could. And then he did latch. I mean, so much, my nipples were bloody because he wasn't latching. When I gave birth in 2009, podcasts weren't what they are. So I didn't have any kind of resource like, my podcast is one of a zillion that talk about parenthood, motherhood, but I just wanted to hear other moms talk about, how do you do this? How do you do this? And I still ask that all the time. My kid's almost 12. It's like, how do you do this? How do you do this? How do you do this and still maintain self? How do you do this and do it well and create space for your child to be? So that's, I don't know if I answered your.
Yes, you did. You did.
Okay.
And I think one of my other questions was why, why the focus on moms? And I think you just, you kind of answered that. And it was in part because you needed to hear that. You needed to create a community and a space where you were hearing from moms and hearing what they had to say, so that you too could kind of be vulnerable and hear those commonalities. And I'm wondering, because you've done a lot of interviews with moms now, and so what do you find, like, if you were then, because you're also an author and you have characters who are mothers, and so what are some of the things that you've learned in these interviews of real life moms that are similarities enough that could be infused into other characters to make mother characters more dynamic, more real, more vulnerable, more authentic?
Oh, I think it's just at the seed of it, right? Like, I've done 85 interviews. Oh, my dog, it's like having a toddler. At the seed of it is that there's like a loss of self when you become a mom. There's a loss of course he does it now. During my time when I was muted, he wasn't barking at all, but now he's going to just bark continually. There's this like loss of self, and trying to find that self again after you become a mom, I think, is the universal struggle. And that goes across, socioeconomic, race, sexual orientation, different family nuclei. Is that like, who am I now? And who do I want to be? Who am I with my partner if I have a partner? And that's really hard, because as I was growing up, what was modeled to me and my mom was I see it did it again, just a stay-at-home mom. I hate that. And I did it, and it came out of my mouth. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and it wasn't modeled to me at that time. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, so it was just like almost like Working Girl. That movie was it was almost like you were either a mom or you were a career woman, and you just couldn't have both. And now that's on its head completely, but it's still really hard to do both. And when you're working, you feel guilty that you're not with your kid. And when you're with your kid, you feel guilty that you're not nurturing your business. And that is just such a universal thing of who am I now? And I'm still a woman and I'm still young and I'm still a sexual, sensual being. And where does that fit in? And God, I need some sleep, like all that stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's like when you said that, it really is interesting because, then we bring all our own preconceived notions of motherhood into motherhood, right? Of like what a mom should be and how we should act and how our moms were. And, now we have like new mom friends that we're meeting at the pump station and we're breastfeeding together. And now it's like, it's and you're sort of going through, they don't know you at all other than you're now a mom with a kid about the same age. And so now we're like playdate moms and then, trying to figure out who we are and sharing that and stuff too. So I think that's really interesting. I love that's what you got out of that. I do think there are some shows that maybe show that, but I don't know that there's a lot of, television moms that sort of go through that struggle. I mean, there are moms who are doing things for their kids, and I'm thinking like Good Girls, right? Which has an organ donation storyline behind it because so many of them. But she becomes a criminal because her kid has kidney failure and needs this special drug and then needs a transplant and she needs money and all of those kinds of things. So there's sort of this I'll do anything for my kids narrative, which I think is very common in motherhood storylines, because we will do, and not that it's not authentic, but then that challenge of like, who am I in the mix of things. Yeah, that's amazing. That was my, and then Jennifer, I was going to say the connection to you with organ donation is that we were talking to one of the anonymous person. Okay. And we were just joking about some moms have a nanny and, some don't and blah, blah, blah. And she said, what? Have a nanny? I'll sell my kidney on the black market for a nanny.
Oh, that's so funny. I totally forgot about that. Yeah.
And it's just, that's the black market punchline is, well, it's like, if we really want something and we can't afford it, like we're going to sell our organ on the black market. Do you feel, you said you created the podcast to sort of be in community with these other moms and because that's what you needed kind of at the time. And so are you does it fill you that way? Does it make you feel like, okay, I'm not just totally messing up this whole mom thing because we're sort of all in it together? Is that what you get?
Absolutely. I mean, that, and I'm able to share a wide variation of stories. Piggybacking off of what Erica said about there's so many different ways to give birth. There's so many different ways to be a mom. I had a mom on the show who fell in love with her husband at age 58 and she adopted his daughter legally. And the daughter was 21 and she's her mom. And that story was important for me to tell because there's so many different ways to be a mom. There's so many different ways. And I think, again, calling back to Erica, it's like, I want, and I've had people reach out and say, thank you for interviewing so-and-so and sharing that story because that's my story and I've never heard it before. And it's just all in that effort to like, help us all just feel less alone.
Yeah.
If we can.
One of the things Erica said to me though, because, she mentioned not a mom by choice, right? This is a by design kind of thing. And there's real efforts. Well, I don't know if it's a real, but there's an effort by some to really see diversity in the writers' rooms. TTIE, there's, really making an effort that you cannot have authentic storytelling without a writer's room that has a real diversity of humans who bring their stories into the writer's rooms. Everything else is just like, you know, glaze on top, right? If you really want to get to the donut, you have to make sure that everything, that the people telling these stories are in the room telling the stories. And you mentioned, because with motherhood stories, you kind of said something, you were like, there's not actually that many moms in the writers' rooms.
Right.
And so could you, talk about that for a minute, just moms in the writers' rooms?
It's changing. The culture of writing for television specifically has been very white and very male. And so it has been structured to support white males, which means that they didn't have policies for if you got pregnant or if you needed to like go and take care of your children or childcare or any of those sorts of things were not necessarily thought about when they were coming up with rules for their union. And so there is obviously self-selection. It's like, I can't do that because I got to like figure out my kid situation. There's also I don't see that because, you know, my marital partner is at home with our children. And so I don't see what the problem is. And you're like, well, because you get to sit in this room, somebody else taking care of your babies. And then also pulling in people who you know and love, obviously, to be a part of your writer's room means that you're probably going to pull in more white males. Mm-hmm. And so for a long time, and I'm saying, you know, 80 years, you know, it's been, you know, specifically set up for men. And then as women have come in, they've had to sort of do workarounds where, you know, they don't talk about the fact that they have children. You know, that was a big thing, you know, in the 80s, 90s, you gave birth and you came back into the room as quickly as you could. And you didn't talk about it as a problem or a challenge or something that you actually needed. And so then it fostered this thing of, well, you know, then obviously there's not a problem, you know, but now as we are pulling more people into the room, because obviously those stories are necessary and those people's perspectives on life and love and work and death and birth are, you know, necessary in a room. As more of those people are given the space and opportunity, now it's like, well, now we need to start thinking about how we change rules within our union because these people have things. And you can't necessarily rely on a person like Shonda Rhimes, for example, who opened up a nursery. Because she's like, look, I didn't got, you know, 3 babies. And I know I gotta have nannies and people, you know, so if you need a space to throw a kid because we're doing stuff in the writer's room, this is what I've set up. You can't rely on the largesse of a showrunner to help you out. And so now we are starting to codify within the union itself, you know, what it looks like for maternal and paternal leave and all of those other things that are necessary so that we can get all of those voices into the room.
Well, Jennifer, one of your interviews was with Erica Messer, who showrunner for Criminal Minds, right? Who runs rooms, runs shows, runs it all. And your question to her was like, how do you do this as a mom? And her answer was?
My husband. Yeah, her husband's, I mean, he's a stay-at-home dad. He, you know, he even homeschooled the kids for a couple of years. And she's very open about that. She says there's no way this would work without him. And now she has her own production company. I mean, you know, but it's yeah. And often I also have this team of writers, this 2 women, they're both moms, and I was interviewing them for something else, and they shared about how they would go into pitch meetings, and the moment that it came up that they were moms, the room would go dead silent, and they could feel the energy drop, and they thought, oh shoot, did we just lose this job? And so they would really try not to mention it, you know, even though it's the reason that they are who they are and have the perception that they have on life, you know, but it's like, yeah.
And back to kind of the authenticity and representation and all that kind of stuff, like, for any part, if you can't bring all of yourself into your storytelling, if you can't bring all of yourself to your work, especially as a storyteller, right? Like, I even noticed that when I became a mom, I had like one nice framed photo of my kids that I put on my desk, because I felt like anything else would be unprofessional. If I had too many pictures of my children, it would be unprofessional of me. And so I had one nice, framed photo to acknowledge that they existed, but not to like lead with my motherhood. So I think still kind of the child of the 80s and coming in, we don't, there is an understanding that we're supposed to kind of put this in a box of some sort. So it's interesting, and I'm glad to see too, as there are women showrunners, that they're starting to be like, we're not just here to sit at the table, but to change the table, right? To like bring the kids with us and bring the daycare here and those kinds of things. So, all right. So I want to, Jennifer does this in her podcast. She at the end asks some questions. So I wanted to just get your guys' take of, do you have any favorite TV shows or storylines about motherhood, and why? Erica, do you want to go first?
This Is Us. I think, the main storyline of her working to be a mother and now losing her tether because of Alzheimer's. Just her learning to be a mother of an adopted child of another race. All of those things I think are interesting. Felicia Rashad as a mother who's like a harder mother and like a much more like different and difficult relationship that she has with her own daughter. Pamela Adlon on Better Things.
Oh, yes.
I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
I love her storylines with her kids, feel real and not placated. Even Rainbow Johnson on Blackish. She's like, I'm a doctor, and then she has to struggle with the fact that she's also a mother of 5 children. And this is based on King Barris's actual life before I believe they're no longer together, but his wife, is a physician and had 5 kids. And wanting to be like this amazing professional and also balancing having enough time to be yourself and balancing and having enough time for your spouse. And, so they have done some really interesting episodes in the past where they have also explored that as well, I thought.
Yeah. Tara, what about you? I know you kind of thought about this, of like what shows and storylines about motherhood have resonated with you.
I mean, Erica took for sure This Is Us. I mean, that's, what mother cannot watch and feel, there is I'm sure y'all have seen The Passion of the Christ. So Passion of the Christ, in that movie, a lot of it has to do with Mary, right? They follow her along through that. There's a section where Jesus is falling 3 times and her memory goes back to when he was a little boy and he fell and she was running after him. And so, we all can resonate with watching our kids in painful situations and suffer. And that storyline, I thought, was done beautifully, how they pulled her into so much of that story. And then just a complete opposite was, I love Melissa McCartney. I think she's absolutely hysterical. And there was a movie a long time, not too long ago, but called Life of the Party. I don't know if you saw that, where she went back to college with her kids, with her daughter. And just her navigating going back to college when her child was there. We all have that, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be fun to go back to school kind of thought. And so I just thought she was just so fun in that movie. So she's just great. I love her humor. But Erica nailed a bunch of them.
Yeah.
That were, I don't think we all need to talk anymore. She nailed it. No. Absolutely nailed it.
Are there storylines or TV shows, movies where you've seen moms and you're like, yeah, that resonates with me?
Well, it's interesting because I like that I get to go last because I can sort of piggyback on. But as you were talking, Erica and Tara, I was thinking of something I'm watching currently called The Mayor of Easttown.
Yeah.
It's on Kate Winslet, who can do no wrong in my eyes, and it's really just such a layered story of her life and her as a mom and now a grandma, and
Yeah,
it's
that's a good
about
one.
loss and death, and I mean it's so well done, and the writing is phenomenal. And then when Tara was talking like about an older movie, it made me think of the movie Mask, which is from the 80s. You guys remember that movie? And
Yeah.
Cher was
Yes.
the mom.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh, I mean, just
That was good.
there are these roles, but I will say, I'm going to say this about that movie, Tara, that you just brought up. I had a bone to pick with that movie, and I love Melissa. I actually know her through a friend. They did the Groundlings together, and I didn't like that at the beginning of the movie, they made her this very dowdy.
I know.
It was like she was like,
Like
you
a
know,
grandma.
and a white male wrote and directed that movie.
Mm-hmm. They
And
make like an old mom. Like
yes,
old
and
mom,
she's
right?
like in her 40s,
Right.
maybe late 40s, and they dressed her, and even her mannerisms was like she was in her 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like that because then she, transformed into this, sexual, sensual woman that she already was. Like we already are that.
Right.
And so anyway, it was interesting because I liked the concept of that movie, but I didn't like that because I see that too often and that's why I titled my podcast MILF, Moms I'd Like to Follow. But it is a wink and a nod towards like, yeah, just because I've birthed a child, doesn't mean I'm not sexy or sexual anymore.
Right. No, I agree with you on that, Jennifer. I do. I think I just love Melissa McCartney so much that I could overlook some of that.
I hear that, and she's great, and it's a good movie, and it's fun. But
yeah, I mean,
that goes to one of my other questions, which is like, what are those outdated stereotypes of moms? And I think that might be kind of one of them, where it's like you're in your 40s and you're in cat sweaters,
right.
or something. And
right.
like, I don't own any cat sweaters. That we sort of, there's an oldering of us, right? Where, and especially these days, that just doesn't feel very authentic. Are there other, another one for me is any kind of stereotype, honestly, where a mom, where they always put themselves last, where there's just a constant, it's like it's all about the kids, and you don't ever see them as human women, and the struggles or challenges or breakdowns, or interacting with like their girlfriends, like they have a friend group and things, but that the relationship is really just like, hi mom, and they're the mom, they're in the kitchen, they're, and that still sort of happens in some of these, in some of these shows. Are there other stereotypes and outdated versions of motherhood that you're still seeing that you'd like to, there's organ donation myths and misconceptions I'd like to kick to the curb, like the black market for organs. So it made me think, oh, are there motherhood things we'd like to kick to the curb?
Yeah, I think Jennifer had it with that's a really good example about trying to make a mom look so outdated that her transformation is such a shock, right? And you can, I guess, see how it's written. So it's made that way, right? But yeah, I think that's a really good point, about the outdated. I think one of the things that also kind of bugs me is not so much outdated, is the fact that there's also a lot of commercials and things where the mom does it all and the dad's an idiot. Have you seen seriously, my husband will go, really? So that is kind of one of those things where it's like, no, really, you should be kind of on even playing field, right? But they do come across in these commercials where the mom does everything, answers every question right. The dad has zero idea what to do. And that's a pet peeve for me also. In just the commercials on TV. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that one because I'm also like, really, we're
Right.
literally expected. This is like some sort of social construct that we're supposed to have every ball in the air,
Right.
and dad's like, where do they
What's
go to
going on?
school?
Right.
Like what's happening? You're like,
Right.
oh my God. I mean, I suppose it resonates a little bit, but that isn't how, women who are really seeking like partnership and who have a full career and a full life, like it is, the dad is right there with you on all
Right.
these things, and not
Well,
just
but portraying it that way too, it actually puts more pressure on the
yeah,
mom because it's like, okay, she can't even rely on, someone helping her doing it right. She's got to do it all, right?
right.
So if you go down deeper in those layers,
Yeah.
that a
Yeah,
lot of
it's almost like they're trying to present women as these strong women, but you're like, dude, you're just creating a whole new stereotype of like having to do it all kind of
right.
thing, and that doesn't work out any at all either. Um, that's awesome. Well, thank you guys. We're kind of at the end of our time. Is there anything else, about I don't know, about motherhood? I feel like this has been a really rich conversation, and I'm hoping too, because I think that one of the things I learned, and this was from a friend of mine who is a writer and a mom. Our kids went to school together, and I was, talking to her about organ donation. And I was like, well, where is that? I got to get it right. Got to have some accuracy here. Like, got to present it correctly. And she was like, T, like, settle. That's not my job as a writer to be all accurate. My job is as a storyteller is to be authentic and to really, and it just hit me over the head. I was like, so that authenticity to the portrayal of a donor mom, where someone like Tara who can do exactly what was, where there's things she can't control, and what you can control is what you do next. Like that is the representation of a donor mom to me, and especially through Tara's story and others. And so these kind of authentic portrayals of women, and women who choose to be moms, who choose not to be moms, who maybe give birth and are moms, but then give some other woman an opportunity to be moms. And then what we do with our motherhood and kind of that full expression of ourselves. So, I'm always looking for people to create a full expression about organ donation and not make it a stereotype or a punchline or a joke or a throwaway or something scary or weird, but really delve into those stories that are deep and real. And, I really feel like the donor mom story is, to me, hands down the most profound and powerful. It really combines those two things of like the
Like,
power
you
of
know what it
organ
is?
donation.
It's really all about love. That's exactly what it's about. And that's what motherhood's about. And that's, the story of organ donation is 100% about love. I just want to say tonight, thank you so much. I feel so honored to be on here with Erica and Jennifer.
Thank you.
This has been such a gift. So I'm so honored to be sitting here with you all. Thank you.
Well, thank all of you. We'll have this, we'll record this, we will promote it, we'll put it up on our website. And I'm hoping that it will really help to inspire writers just to dig deep into not just organ donation, but into kind of that full and authentic portrayal. And Erica, thank you so much for your episode Catch, which did such a great job at that. And I encourage everyone to go over to the MILF podcast, and there's so many amazing stories to listen to and to dig into. And then, of course, Tara's book, Taylor's Gift. So all three of you are such great storytellers, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.